Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and once again it is time for the Monday Q&As. Sorry my voice isn't back completely, but I'm going to knock these out anyway. Sorry I'm a day late with these. You guys can please stop sending all the death threats. I will have these out for you shortly. So, let's get this started. First question. I've read that while the CNS can recover within 48 hours, the local motor neurons, that would be the peripheral nervous system, can take up to 72 hours to recover, suggesting the optimal frequency for the best strength gains is every 4 to 5 days. What do you think? I think that people focus too much on recovery being essential to perform new adaptive stress from your training. For example, the Bulgarian system, and I'm not even talking about the Bulgarian system the way the Olympic lifters did it who won all those gold medals. I'm talking about Bulgarian light that's even been done by guys who are on no drugs successfully, which means that people are coming in and hitting training maxes 4, 5, even 6 days a week, but only one session per day on all their big lifts. How are they doing this? Because they're not hitting 100% maxes. They're hitting training maxes, which is usually around 90% of your competition max. Here's the reality. Your nervous system, peripheral nervous system, does not need to be fully recovered in order to put out 90% of your true maximum effort. And 90% intensity is enough to improve strength on 1 rep maxes if it's done consistently. Many world champions in Olympic lifting and powerlifting both have utilized this type of method. This focus on being fully recovered so that you can put forward absolute maximum effort again in training just isn't true. Higher frequency with submaximal effort actually generally produces better results in the long term than waiting till you're fully recovered so that you can put out maximum effort again. Remember, 85 to 90% effort is all that's required to stimulate fantastic adaptations from a training session. So again, this is the sort of stuff that's been overhyped and too many articles have been written on, and it's just not true. It's just not essential to make progress. All right, next question. Opinion on girls taking testosterone being completely legal to become a boy and athletes wanting to use hormones to enhance performance being completely illegal. Yeah, this is really absurd. It's something I have a problem with because it is very hypocritical that we have laws that allow people to use the same hormones to become transgender because of an identity crisis that they have, and they desire to be a different gender, or they see themselves as a different gender, and they're allowed, this is a perfectly legal use for these prescription drugs, but someone else who has an identity issue, maybe a body image issue, and they can't be happy with their body at the amount of muscle mass that a normal male can have with normal hormone levels. If they want to use the same drug, there is no legal way to prescribe it for that purpose. It has to be prescribed for another purpose, even if that's the purpose that they're using it for. So it's actually illegal to even prescribe it for muscle building purposes. When in reality, it's actually what the women are doing with it also. They're not only getting secondary male characteristics from these hormones, but they're also building muscle mass so that they can have the amount of muscle that a man has. It's really being used for the same purpose. People who have an identity crisis or some sort of body image issue, and it's just so weird that one is legal and the other isn't, when the latter is a far more common use of it. And again, it's just been done largely due to politics, and a lot of politics and propaganda that we have in the United States going back to the Cold War, which is stuff I've covered in other videos in the past. I should maybe cover that again in the future so that people understand the history of how we became anti-steroid inside the United States, of which politics fueled all of that and which media outlets promoted it. All right, next question. If I do an upper-lower split 3 times a week each and would like to bring up weak points such as biceps, can I do an extra set or 2 on my lower body days as well? Adding extra sets to the upper body day is too time-consuming. Here's the problem with that. As I've said in the past, training 6 days a week like that on an upper-lower split, because if you're doing each one 3 times a week, that's 6 days a week. If you're not on drugs, I'm going to recommend that you not train this way. And particularly if you're not on drugs that strengthen your connective tissue and joints, I'm going to simply recommend that you avoid this type of training. Now, some people can get away with it. I understand that. I've known people who trained this way for many years successfully who didn't use drugs. They also have the genetic recovery to do so. They have thicker, larger bone structures, therefore they have thicker connective tissue. For those of you who do not have these genetic gifts, this is running a higher chance of injury. So I don't recommend that you train that way. However, if you seem to be big jointed, or you're on drugs that will let you recover from this, then yeah, I would agree with you there that if you have a lagging muscle group, training it more often if you're on some sort of split routine, and throwing in that muscle group extra work at a higher frequency will produce faster results for that muscle group than simply adding more volume on the same days that you train it. However, the caveat being, since you're already hitting it 3 times a week in terms of hypertrophy, you're already maxed out. You're very, very unlikely to see additional size gains in a muscle group by training it directly more than about 3 times a week, other than, again, a small genetic minority of people who seem to respond to even higher frequency training, but we're talking maybe 10% of the population. So when you get to the threshold of where you're at, it may not be beneficial to do so anymore. You might simply need to just add more volume at that point for the muscle group, or find more efficient or more effective exercises for that muscle group for your particular insertions in body. All right, next question. Is bench press, overhead press, bent over rows, and weighted chin-ups 3 times a week enough for decent arm development? I would rather spend my small amount of time in the gym doing these movements. I've been training for 2 years. Thanks. This one's really hard to answer. It depends on how advanced you are in training, and again, it depends upon your individual genetics. Some people can build massive arms off of nothing but compound movements. About 1 in 3 people seem to be able to do this genetically. The rest of us, I happen to be in that other 2/3 group, we're going to have to do some direct arm work to keep everything proportionate. And that just comes down to individual genetics, what your structure looks like, what your insertions look like, and how genetically gifted you are in your arms. And again, if you're very gifted in your arms genetically, you can get away with that. Now, as far as beginners go, whole different ballgame. Even my novice program, I throw in some arm work. That's done just to make people happy. We have research out there showing at this point that novices, meaning your first 6 to 8 weeks training, the direct arm work doesn't actually add any additional muscle growth, or at least not a statistically significant amount of muscle growth, that things like bench press and lat pull downs are capable of adding just as much muscle mass to a beginner's arms as throwing in curls and tricep extensions are on top of it. The extra isolation work doesn't seem to do much, but as you become more advanced, if you're not genetically gifted in your arms, you very well might need to throw in some extra work for them just to stay balanced. And that's just the reality of individual genetics. All right, next question. If not powerlifting, is there any reason not to substitute the bench press with purely the incline press and the overhead press? Any thoughts? As I've said before, if you don't powerlift, the bench press is not really essential. I love the incline bench. I do it personally. I actually overhead press also. For a lot of people, you may not need to do both. It's going to depend upon your individual routine and whether things like delts and upper chest are lagging for you. But if you're not going to do a bench press, you're going to need an additional exercise for your lower chest and middle chest if you want to actually fully develop it. The incline is fantastic, but it's not going to fully develop the entire pectoral the way that you might want it to. You're going to need to either throw in some weighted dips, a decline bench, maybe a flat or decline dumbbell bench. You're going to need to do some sort of exercise that does work all the lower insertions and fibers of your pectorals if you want to balance it out. Again, unless you're just really genetically gifted in your pecs, in which case the incline bench will be all that you need. All right, next question. Are there any negatives to refeeding with beer when cutting? No, not really, unless you're consuming such an excessive amount of alcohol that it actually elevates your liver enzymes. So if you're drinking 30 beers on your refeed day, yeah, it could be a problem. As far as the arguments about alcohol reducing muscle protein synthesis, this is not really that good a data out there on that. Plenty of top athletes drink a lot of alcohol, and alcohol is actually a legitimate performance enhancing drug. We have data on it, and we know that many of the top lifters around the world, like the Russians, compete while drinking tons of vodka, and they win gold medals doing so. And there's actually discussion of banning alcohol in sports purely because of the performance enhancing benefits. So that shouldn't be a concern. Now, again, your only concern though is that, again, over consuming too many calories, but again, probably unlikely on a refeed, or such an excessive amount of alcohol that it's damaging your liver. And if it's elevating liver enzymes too much, your body's not going to be able to detox other things in the body, and it could slow down recovery. So again, if in moderation, or if you're really only getting drunk 1 day a week on a refeed, it's perfectly acceptable to use beer for this purpose. All right, next question. Best stimulants to use for pre-workout purposes. I'm going to go with caffeine, coffee. However, outside of that, I don't recommend that people train on stims. I'm not a fan of pre-workouts. I think that the negatives outweigh the positives of it. And you also get to a point where if you use them all the time, you become addicted to needing them in order to train. And what happens with people who use too many pre-workout stimulants, they can no longer train without stimulants after a certain amount of time. The other issue is that the effect they could have on the adrenaline glands and the amount of adrenal fatigue they could create could actually slow down your recovery. There's no evidence that the extra performance that you put out while using stimulants actually produces more gains. We don't actually have data showing that this actually happens, because the reality is, while you might be able to stimulate a little more adaptation in one workout while on stimulants, they also can impact recovery enough in the nervous system that it's going to impede how soon you can train again. So we run into an issue of you might be gaining one benefit while having a negative that counteracts it in terms of your long-term training. So I don't really recommend it. Save your money and don't use stims to train. And if you want something just to give you a little perk, caffeine or black coffee works wonders. All right, next question. Hi, Jason. Your opinion on the protein quality in supplement industry, protein products like protein chips, cereal, crisps, cookies, coffee, and similar things. I'm not a fan of these products. I don't like all of these protein bars and protein chips and everything that people produce, because the reality is, if you want to eat these things, find a way to work them into your diet. Eat them on your cheat days. All these protein versions of these foods that people make, they taste nasty. I don't care how much anyone claims Quest bars taste good. They taste like fucking shit. And you're paying a premium, massive price for a candy bar with a scoop of fucking protein added to it. And it tastes like shit. Why are you paying $3 for that when you can go get a Snicker bar for $1 and just add a scoop of protein powder to a protein shake or eat a half a chicken breast? Why do this? It's just silly. And most people, again, if they're eating a balanced diet, they don't need to add extra protein to their diet if they're trying to gain muscle and they're eating enough food. The only time protein really becomes an issue for most athletic people is when they're trying to lose body fat while holding the muscle mass, or recomposition while in a calorie deficit. Then protein becomes a big deal. Again, are you going to want to sit around wasting all your filling food and your satiation on a bunch of protein cookies and protein candy bars when you're cutting, when you could be eating foods that are more filling and more satiating than that crap, and then just add extra protein from some meat or protein powders? Again, for a lot less money, better satiety. So no, I'm not a fan of these products. I don't really think they have a use. I just think they're clever marketing by the fitness industry. I don't use them. I don't recommend them. All right, next question. I've recently noticed my supinated arm is bent while deadlifting. I'm having a difficult time keeping it straight. I've had to widen my grip because if I try to strengthen my supinated arm in a normal position, I feel pain in my shoulder blades. Any tips? By supinated, that means the palm forward. So when he's doing a mixed grip, he's got his pronated hand and his supinated hand. He's bending the one like this. That's going to put you at risk of ripping a bicep. So if you can't sort this problem out, you're going to need to make sure that you've got good medical insurance and go ahead and contact a surgeon ahead of time, because you're probably going to need to get your bicep reattached eventually. The reason you're having this problem is because you lack mobility in your shoulder. You need to do some additional shoulder mobility work. You need to do some extra, get a set of bands, start doing face pulls with them, start doing band pull apart, start doing band around the worlds. And you need to basically work on your shoulder mobility. And you might want to consider seeing some sort of sports therapist or a deep tissue massage person who can get in there and do some deep tissue work in your shoulders and in your lats and everything, so they can loosen all of that up and help you out, because basically your shoulders aren't mobile enough and everything is too tight in there. And that's putting tension on your bicep that is causing it to flex a bit while you're supinated. And the other thing that you'll need to do in addition to that is learn motor patterns that allow you to lock your arms out. So like you see me do the hip drop or a bar roll, something like that, in order to help you lock your arms out. So you're going to need the mental cues on top of that, because you've now trained the motor pattern of bending it due to the tightness and everything in your shoulder. You're going to need to unlearn that motor pattern now with a new deadlift technique. All right, next question and last question of the week. Your opinion on Hershel Walkers' physique. You wrote physic, but I assume you mean physique. And athletic ability, and he only does sit-up, push-ups, pull-ups, and martial arts, and at 53 he can still run a 4.340 and one of the best athletes of all time. All right, what I think about that, I think Hershel Walker is an amazingly genetically elite athlete. He has top 10th of a percentile genetics for athletics. Therefore, any sort of intense training that he does is going to make him look fantastic and have an absolutely amazing body as he gets older. Number two, I know a few retired professional athletes, including at least a couple in my family. All of them use drugs still. Tons of them are on testosterone replacement therapy, growth hormone, things like that. I can assure you Hershel Walker has enough money to get these things. And he seems like he's fairly in tune with his body. He probably listens to his doctors and everything. And most of these top athletes who have good doctors, their doctors are going to tend to want to put them on growth hormone replacement therapy, testosterone replacement therapy. You combine that with a guy like that who has amazing genetics, built an amazing base as an athlete for many years. And yes, he's still going to look fantastic in his 50s without doing real weight training of any type, while just doing body weight exercises combined with all that. So no, it's no surprise at all. But remember, just because someone who has amazing genetics for athletics can do something, doesn't mean that you can replicate the same results. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.